Hey everybody, I think we're going to get started here. I'm Nick Matthews, I'm a solutions architect for AWS, and today we're going to be talking about Sophos. So just a few pieces of housekeeping here as we get started. This session is going to be recorded, so you'll get a copy of the recording in your email a few days after this concludes. So I know that's a frequently asked question. As well, we've got some handouts in the panel. So in the right side of your panel, there's a little handout section that's got the white paper with ATLO and a Sophos on AWS white paper in there. As well, there's a questions panel in that panel as well. So as questions come up during the session, please put the questions in there or even before, because we're going to be answering those questions during the session in real time as well as towards the end. We'll have some time for questions and answers and whatnot. So with that said, welcome to ATLO Software Delivers Secure Training with Sophos UTM on AWS. So like I said, I'm Nick Matthews. I'm in the partner solutions architect organization, so I help our networking and security partners on AWS build their products for AWS better. And today we're talking about Sophos. So to get started, let's start with security, right? So the world of security is a little bit different than it was even a couple of years ago. The breaches are getting more expensive. They're having more business impact. More and more data and resources are available digitally, right? So and those are becoming more valuable. So as those become more valuable and more available, the sort of risk and reward for security goes up. So we're seeing things like, if you want to get a botnet with a service contract, you can do that. You can get SLAs on your malware. Attacking is no longer some script kiddie that wants to put his hacking group's name on your website. It's ransomware that's encrypting your data and not letting it back unless you pay thousands of dollars. It's a business now, and that's changed sort of the security mindset and implications. So one of the important things that we talk about at AWS is that you can be more secure than you can be on premises. It's sort of an interesting statement, and it was sort of reinforced by the CIO of Capital One, who came onto our user conference reInvent, which was in November last year, and it's coming up, it feels like pretty quickly this year in November as well. But he said that they can operate more securely on AWS than they can on premises. So how does that work? So there's a couple things that are different in AWS. One is that it's the automation is there. So everything on AWS is an API. There aren't manual steps you have to take to do things. Everything's API driven, which lends itself towards automation. As well, it's a lot of things on AWS are simpler. So it's any security researcher will probably tell you that where there's complexity, there's security problems. And so the more that you can simplify your infrastructure, your operations, your processes, your tools, the more you can simplify those things, the more secure you'll be. And then also making the right security decisions by default. Again, if you don't sort of enforce the right behavior onto users by default, they're not going to do the right behavior. So on AWS, all of our APIs are encrypted. We make it easy to do encryption. So for instance, if you upload an object to S3, you can click a single button to do server-side encryption. And so you can do sort of good hygiene in a very easy way. As well, it's about enforcing strong authorization. So authorization and authentication. So I'll give you an example. So I used to do a lot of network engineering, and I had a blue console cable in my back where, if customers let me in their data centers, I could probably put my blue console cable in some routers, make some configuration changes if they weren't paying attention for whatever reason. And the customer would probably never know, because the chances of them having the strong authentication, the strong logging monitoring everywhere for every device in their environment configured to a single source is very, very unlikely. Very few data centers are set up with that level of discipline and monitoring and auditing. And also, I think that comes back to automation, because if you talk to our CISO and you say, what is AWS doing to really focus on security? One of the main things he'll tell you is automation. Because if you can automate it, it means it happens at the same time every time. That process has been thoroughly thought out, tested, and it runs the same way every time. And there's no people touching it. The easiest way to cause security issues or even downtime is by letting people touch things. Don't let people have access to data. Don't let people touch things. Because people, even if they're well-intentioned, tend to break things even if you don't expect them to. So automation is a key component of that. I think that's really part of the main message here around how AWS can help you be more secure. The other aspect that you want to think about, though, is like what responsibility you have in AWS. So this is a diagram we use with basically every customer when we start off the conversation about security. It's about the shared responsibility model, which basically means that AWS takes security of the cloud, right? So the same things you're doing around your data centers, around physical access management, around physical security, around securing the network, securing the hypervisors, those kinds of things. That's what we do. So the difference is we can do it at a much larger scale because we have such a massive amount of infrastructure. We're able to dedicate more people, more processes to some of the more mundane things like physical security, right? Which we take, very, very seriously because our customers demand that. But then, we secure the infrastructure of the cloud, but the things that customers put in the cloud, they're the customer responsibility. So, for instance, if you put your payment application in AWS, you're responsible for making sure that that payment application is doing payments securely. If you put your data in the cloud, it's your responsibility to encrypt it or to make sure that you're not exposing, any type of sort of confidential data. And so, where that comes in with Sophos is that, they've got the Unified Threat Management Platform, the UTM, which does a lot of the network and security functions. So they can help you configure network controls and those kinds of things, which Brian and some other folks will get into some more later. But the idea is that, if you put it there, it's sort of in your responsibility with the configuration and that data. As well, it's important to say that if you put your data in any one of our regions, it's not going to leave one of our regions. So if you take a look at what we've got from a monitoring perspective, I touched on it a little bit, but we take security extremely seriously. So monitoring is accessed by both automated methods as well as people. We've got concepts like AWS CloudTrail, which allows you to monitor any API call or any infrastructure change that goes on in your environment. We announced this week in New York that CloudTrail is now available for free to all customers. You get a 7-day history of every API call that was made to AWS. So this gives you one log to look at to find out all your infrastructure, AWS API level changes that happen in your environment. So that's really powerful from a security perspective. As well, we're also helping take some of the security operations and security controls that we have that we do internally and exposing that out to customers. So Amazon Inspector was one of the first ways we did that. We also just announced this week that we announced sort of a data loss prevention service called ASE. So these are things that we're doing that we do internally that we're exposing to customers. So Inspector allows you to run sort of a point-in-time check to see if you have any known vulnerabilities or CVEs and those kinds of things running on your instances. And we allow you to do that in an automated way so you can integrate with something like a DevSecOps workflow. As well, part of security is availability. So we're constantly adding new regions and availability zones. I reviewed these slides last week, and they're already out of date. We now have 44 availability zones in 16 different regions. So, like I said before, if you put your data in the Frankfurt, Germany region, it's not going to leave Germany unless you explicitly tell us to replicate it somewhere else, for instance. And with the size and scale of our infrastructure, we're very adept at dealing with things like distributed denial of service or DDoS attacks, because things like Route 53 are very good at blocking those. As well, part of that dealing with those types of attacks is just the amount of volume that you can take, because it's sort of just a bottleneck game, right? So with AWS, you can auto scale up. So if either you have high customer demand or someone's trying to do a malicious attack against you, you can use things like auto scaling to provide availability, which in turn gets you more security. As well, there's integrations, right? So customers still have on-premises data centers. That's still a component for the designs that we're doing with our customers with AWS, especially from a security aspect. If you have on-premises sort of controls that you need to maintain, so Active Directory and authentication are common use cases. We've also got a service called AWS Direct Connect, which allows you to connect privately into AWS through you know, a fixed circuit, so you can connect basically into our backbone. So you can connect in privately and avoid any sort of internet connectivity. And then, you know, we've also got a number of different encryption methods. So some customers go, you know, will ask us, how do I make sure that AWS won't look at my data? And, you know, our answer is, first off, like, we want to make sure we have every control that no one inside AWS can look at your data. But above and beyond that, we encourage you to encrypt that data if those are concerns that you have. So you can bring your own keys into things like our key management service, or KMS. As well as we've got dedicated cloud hardware security modules, or HSMs. And so you can basically rent an HSM from us and manage all your keys and your data encryption that way. So there's a number of different ways to sort of secure your data and your workloads on AWS. In terms of what type of, you know, sometimes customers say, hey, I need ISO 27001, or I need PCI DSS level 3, or I need FedRAMP or HIPAA. We have a large amount of certifications and assurance programs that we can use to make sure that, you know, at least, again, going back to the shared security model, the security of the cloud meets these, you know, these compliance controls. So from here, I'm going to let Brian from Sophos sort of take us into the details of the Sophos UTM.
Thank you very much, Nick. We'll go ahead and get started here. I'm just trying, there we go. All right, so we'll go ahead and start with an introduction of Sophos. I don't want to bore you with too much detail. The thing that I'd like you to take away is that Sophos has been around for a while. So we were founded in 1985. We started out doing security research and antivirus, and we have in those more than 30 years, we've added and rounded out our portfolio to include network, server, endpoint protection, as well as other protections. And so the other thing to note would be that you know, we're doing some things pretty well, as we're recognized as an industry leader in multiple categories. And finally, that we are an AWS security competency partner. We've been I believe we were either the first firewall or one of the first firewalls to be offered through the AWS marketplace. So we have been on this journey for a while, and I'll go ahead and tell you a little bit more about what our products do. We'll start by revisiting the shared security model. So I won't talk about what AWS provides, since Nick did such a great job of that. But what I do want to talk about is, and just reiterate, that while AWS does take care of security of the cloud, you know, it's really your responsibility as a user and a using organization to secure the applications and data and workloads that you run in the cloud. And so what I've done here is modified the diagram a little bit to sort of see on the where you're responsible piece, sort of where Sophos fits in with the different technologies around host security and intrusion prevention and next generation firewall, Outbound Gateway, which we're going to talk a lot about today, as well as VPN and web application firewall, and then where your applications and content would be. So a lot of customers that I talk with, they ask, say, you know, we're using access control lists and security groups within AWS. We're good, right? And I always, you know, sort of regretfully tell them that, well, you know, you've started out and you're using these technologies that provide a base level of security for you. But if you really want to get deeper, you want to use a technology like Sophos UTM on AWS, because when you compare them side by side, security groups are going to do a great job of allowing you to define rules that say, you know, I'm going to allow access over port 80 and port 443 to these web servers in my web server farm that's located in this VPC. And so, you know, kind of like when you're at an airport and you walk up to the security checkpoint, you present your ticket and they say, oh, okay, you are who you say you are, you've got a pass, you're allowed to go through. And then the next level of that would be you set your bag down on a conveyor belt, it goes through an x-ray machine and you walk through a body scanner. And that's really how I like to think of the Sophos technologies, because what you're really doing is you're taking that step deeper. You're going beyond saying allow or deny traffic from this source IP and port to this destination, but you're really looking at the traffic. And so we have the ability to do application control. We have the ability to really dig into packets and make decisions as to whether or not traffic is malicious or not based on both signatures and behavior. We have web application firewall, and we even have the ability to do outbound URL and content filtering, and that's something we're going to talk about more today because of Outbound Gateway and some of the things that ATLO software is doing. So let me talk to you a little bit about Sophos UTM. So Sophos UTM on AWS, this is a product that essentially started out as an on-premises appliance, and then what we did is we virtualized it and we brought it into the AWS environment and we really optimized it. But essentially, you're talking about an all-in-one next-generation firewall, and it is including a number of different technologies. So you get your firewall rules, which is in many ways like security groups, but you can manage them all from a single place. You also get a web application firewall, IPS, and a number of other technologies. Let's talk a little bit about why organizations choose UTM. So one, it's an all-in-one protection. And so for a lot of organizations that are on their journey to migrating to the cloud, you know, we see customers today that have UTM on premises and they have some traditional workloads, maybe database or CRM in their on-premises environment, and they want to migrate that over, and they want to bring their Sophos protection over too. And they like that they have the all-in-one protection, and they like that it's very easy to manage across multiple environments. So now they have the same technology protecting both their on-premises environment and their cloud environment, and they're using that technology maybe even to create a VPN tunnel to do a site-to-site VPN. And they can simply and easily create and apply policies across multiple environments. We'll talk a little bit how we integrate with the auto scaling and cloud formation templates, but you can automatically scale the size of your protection, which is really great. And I'll talk about an example now. And that example is, you know, so we're going to talk about Outbound Gateway. We're going to talk about protecting Amazon workspaces. And if you think about your Amazon workspace users, if you have them, maybe they come in at 9 a.m. and maybe they leave at 5 p.m. And so you really start to see workspaces spinning up and lots of user activity in the morning, and maybe that you know, peaks and falls throughout the day, but then that traffic really drops off at 5 p.m. Well, if in an on-premises world you've got a hardware appliance firewall, and you know, as you need more protection you buy one and then you're stuck with it. But in the cloud world, where you can dynamically scale up and scale down, you can scale up your protection during the day. And if you're doing pay-as-you-go licensing, which is great for things that aren't steady state, then you're only paying for the protection you're using. So scaling up to peak during the day and then scaling back down in the evening. Okay, then also I mentioned, so leader in Gartner Magic Quadrant, actually in a number of different areas, which is kind of neat, but you can check that out on your own if you like. And then finally, it integrates with AWS services. And let's talk a little bit about those integrations. And so I would say that the beauty of Sophos UTM on AWS is our integrations with AWS that allows you to take advantage of a fully native cloud experience, essentially, that does scale up and scale down and provides you with lots of agility and speed. And so the first thing that I'll talk about is really the cloud formation templates. So giving you the ability to automatically deploy and configure your Sophos UTMs, and also do that scaling up and scaling down. We store everything in S3, and when we go through some of the architecture diagrams, I'll talk more about that. Obviously, you can put the UTM workers in an auto scaling group, and we work also with elastic load balancing, and so you can have inbound and outbound elastic load balancers to distribute traffic. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about how Sophos UTM is deployed and how it's priced. So just like all of the other AWS services that you use, you go into your console and you launch the services. Well, for us, you go into the AWS marketplace, you search for Sophos, you select the offer that you're interested in. You can check it out for 30 days, and after 30 days, you convert to paid. And then you've got two licensing options. And the first licensing option is pay as you go, and the second one is BYOL. And so if you have workloads or protection requirements that fluctuate, whether that be you want to add protection to something in dev test that's getting pretty close to being promoted to production, or if you've got workspaces users and you've got something that's your user activity is variable, pay as you go is great. I think it's also a great way to do experiments. The other option would be BYOL. So if you've got, say, an AWS and Sophos partner that you enjoy working with and you're looking to get support from them and you're looking to maybe negotiate a discount on your license and you've got sort of a steady state protection requirement, BYOL is great. So you purchase the license through your partner, and then you launch the BYOL instance within the AWS marketplace, and you simply apply the license that you've been given. So there's a lot of flexibility around that. Okay, let's shift gears a little bit and let's talk about inbound and outbound protection. And so specifically what I'm looking to get to here is Outbound Gateway. So the first thing is really talking about elasticity for inbound WAF traffic and outbound VDI traffic. So you can use elastic load balancers, and you can come in, configure your WAF, and you can have a number of different UTM workers, and those can scale up and scale down. That's on the inbound side. And then VDI being your virtual desktop workspaces specifically, so you can do something for that as well. And we'll go into an architecture diagram that talks about that. Also VPC peering, so one of the things we'll take a look at is how we do that with Outbound Gateway. And then really some organizations, they like to have a shared security services infrastructure, and so maybe they route everything through a couple of VPCs, or maybe one VPC that spans a couple of AZs, availability zones, and other organizations. So I think that particular scenario is great for organizations that are bringing more traditional workloads. Doesn't always apply to organizations that are building cloud native microservice based applications, but sometimes it does. And then just redundancy and failover, which we'll take a look at, and it'll become very clear when we look at the architecture diagram. And then this link here, so Office in a Box. So this is a presentation that was given, I believe, 2 years back by a guy by the name of Steve Mueller, who was then on the Workspaces team at AWS. He's now moved on to do something else. But he gave a presentation at reInvent, and it talks about Outbound Gateway, and it talks about Amazon Workspaces, and it's really quite fascinating, and it gives you an idea of how AWS protects their workspace infrastructure at a very large scale. Okay, so this is the most basic rollout that you can do. What we have here is a single instance in HA configuration. What you'll see here in the middle left of the screen, you've got the Sophos UTM, so that's sitting in an availability zone, and it is, so if you look up top, you've got the internet, you've got an IGW or an internet gateway, and then that's coming in, and that traffic is pointing to the Sophos UTM. After the traffic is processed and all of the rules are evaluated, then it goes to an internal ELB or elastic load balancer that then goes to your EC2 instances. And so in this particular case, what we've got is an elastic IP that's configured, and what you have is a standby. And so if your primary Sophos UTM goes down, there is state information that's being shared. So if it appears that the state is down, then the standby can come up so that you have high availability. Now here's an architecture that is a little bit more sophisticated, and so the example here would be Web Application Firewall, but basically it's kind of the same thing as far as traffic coming in from the IGW to the Sophos UTM. And in this case, what you've got is as a user or as an administrator, you would interact with Sophos UTM controller, and all of your configuration and policy changes would be made there. Once you'd save it, it would get snapshotted off, and all of that information would go up to Amazon S3, and then through an SNS notification, the workers would find out about the new configuration, and then that new configuration would be pulled down from S3 to the UTM workers in order to seamlessly and consistently apply policy for your Sophos protection. And then in this particular case, again, after going through a UTM worker, it would go to ELB and then to your web application. So the final architecture example is OGW, or Outbound Gateway, and the thing that's really cool about this, so this is how you would architect at a high level if you were looking to protect your workspaces or some other virtual desktop environment. And so if you look at the bottom, you've got your private client subnet, and basically as traffic flows out of those instances or those workspaces, if you will, it's going to go ahead and hit the outbound gateway, and the outbound gateway is going to ensure that any policies that you have set up are being complied with, so acceptable usage policies, and taking a look at outbound URL filtering. And then what winds up happening is the OGW sitting in the subnet there with on the private client subnet, it creates a GRE tunnel to the UTM workers, so you've got essentially a VPN there, and then the traffic gets processed and it gets sent out to the internet. And so that's a very high level, how you would architect for 3 different scenarios for UTM on AWS. Okay, and then what I'd like to do here is just give you a very quick overview of server protection, since today we want to focus on network and outbound gateway, but we do offer Sophos server protection on AWS. And so essentially what this is an agent-based protection, so for anti-malware and for ensuring that malicious code isn't executed on a machine, provides for host-based intrusion prevention. And it's really kind of interesting because we actually, this isn't available through the marketplace. We actually have a SaaS, a web-based management platform called Sophos Central, and from there we actually automatically discover your EC2 instances in your AWS environment, bringing back a whole lot of information to allow you to group those based on any tags that you might have, and then you can also apply policy from there. The great thing is, again, for either cloud or on-premises environments, you've got a single place to create server protection policy and consistently apply it. And then, so just some of the things, so powerful protection, there's server application whitelisting, we've got one-click server lockdown, advanced anti-malware, and host intrusion prevention. And so all of these things together really provide you with an effective protection against zero-day attacks. Performance without impact we give you lots of different functionality, so you can increase the performance of the machine. So you can choose which portions of a file system you actually want to scan. So in the event that there are certain libraries that you don't need to scan, then by excluding them, it speeds up your scan speed. The agent itself is really lightweight. You can schedule when you're going to do scans, so that's pretty good. Any updates are compressed, so they're very easy to download. And I'll go ahead and just stop there because I'm cognizant of time, and I want to give the guys at ATLO a chance to go through some of their success stories and how they did things. But I'll go ahead and transition here now. And so I just want to say before turning it over that with AWS and Sophos, you really have the ability to build some great things and provide for the protection of those things. And so now I want to turn it over to ATLO and let them tell you all about what they've created.
Okay, thank you, Brian. This is Devin Broom. I'm one of the co-owners of ATLO, and I guess this is going to be maybe a little bit of a different conversation than usually are on these kind of talks. It's about social entrepreneurism, which is one of them fancy quarter words that I just learned the other day, and I called Clay, my business partner, and said, "Boy, we're social entrepreneurs," and because I just didn't know what it is, and we're at a university today, and they even teach classes on it, so I'm a little behind in learning exactly what that is. But what we're doing is that we've got a business that we are helping people is the main goal, and in prisons there's over a 50% recidivism rate, and the problem is they're getting out. And when they get out, we need them to be able to get out and have a career and not just a job flipping burgers somewhere. And so Clay and I were janitors back in 1992 together. When we met in college, and we worked at a bar, but there was a slow bar. The only people who were making any money seemed to be the janitors. So we took that over and have been friends since. And he went his way, and I went out my way, and on my ventures, I became the CIO of the University of Louisiana system, and that is your four-year institutions throughout Louisiana, like Southeastern, McNeese, Nichols, or the University of Louisiana at Lafayette, where I am today. And so I got a call about 2 years ago from my counterpart, my old counterpart at the Department of Corrections, a guy named Dawson Andrews. And he said, "Man, we just tried to do an implementation of some software, of virtualization of software, and it just didn't work. And the problem that they were having is, for obvious reasons, folks in corrections are not allowed to get on the internet." And he said, but the problem was that all of the certifications, all the training, all of that was on CDs for all the years. Well, they stopped making those CDs. And so the end result was they were really denied the very end piece, which is that certification and credentialing, that when they get out, they can get a real job. And Clay, I think I'll turn it over to you, and we can talk a little bit more about our system.
Yeah, thanks, Devin. And Brian, Nick, thank you for the information on AWS and Sophos. We've used about all the things that you guys spoke about to implement our system. So the big challenge that we faced, that we were handed, was to develop some sort of platform that's going to allow an incarcerated adult or adjudicated youth to sit down at a computer terminal and have access to current content. The fact is that, you know, they're computer labs in prisons aren't anything new. Computer labs with internet access are pretty rare. The inmate labs, as they were before, always relied on a client-server based application, and those applications had to be updated quarterly, biannually by the IT staff of the prison, who were already spread thin and had a lot on their plate. Those updates were time consuming and did not get done all the time, and so the inmates were left kind of stagnant. Then soon after that, the software vendors that took their CDs and DVD updates and just did away with it, thus creating more of a problem. To make it even worse, the professional certification testing and adult basic education testing, high school equivalency testing, was all moved to computer-based, which caused a big problem because they were internet-based machines they had to sit down at to take the test. In our meetings with wardens and corrections administrations across the nation, when you say internet and inmate in the same sentence, it gives people heartburn. And the fact is, as you see the statistic there, is 95% of these guys and women are getting out. And you know, while we have them, the best thing that we can do is to teach them a skill, a trade, a career that they can, upon release, can make a living wage and take care of their families. if we just house and feed, it's proven that they're going to recidivate, and while they're in there, we're just teaching them how to be a better criminal. So why not teach them how to fix your air conditioning or fix your electrical in your house? So that was a big challenge. We were lucky enough to know a fella at AWS, Jason Miller, and about 6 months prior to this challenge being put on us, I ran into Jason. He had told me what he was doing in the workspaces group over at AWS. And as soon as we were given the network diagram that the Department of Corrections had used in reviewing it, there were physical firewalls all over the state at different facilities, servers all over the state at different facilities, and it was just it just looked like an IT overhead maintenance nightmare. So we met with Jason and pulled this diagram out and started just Xing through all of these moving parts, these firewalls and servers and things like that. And when we got done, we had nothing left but the zero client and the gateway and all of our stuff we needed in our VPC. So we were able to sit down and draw out our VPC that we and all the components needed to get this going. And we did it for very little money up front because we didn't have to go and buy all of these physical pieces, these appliances. We were able to use the Sophos 30-day trial. We were able to stand up a few small EC2s. We were able to stand up a few workspaces just to see if this was going to be a viable solution. And we found out in short order it was going to be a viable solution. So as we progressed through building the VPC and adding the Sophos UTM and using it to handle the outbound traffic and filter the outbound traffic so that the inmates were able to just get to what they needed to get to. But one other benefit is that we were able to use the UTM from Sophos to actually block sites within an allowed domain. So second to an escape in corrections is an inmate using some sort of communication tool to contact a victim, to contact a judge. So it's a very serious matter in corrections. So web forms like contact us, forgot password, things like that. We had to go through and make sure that all those were blocked from the UTM, all the while allowing it to get to the other sites within that domain. So it was a big benefit to us. Using workspaces, our management of rolling out updates, the ability to create a workspace, create an image, create a bundle, and then push that out to hundreds of machines at the same time is a huge benefit and time saver for us. There was no way we were going to be able to capitalize this as a business using physical devices scattered across the state. It would just have been too much overhead. Now we're using the pay-as-you-go with Sophos, and our the UTM's performing great. The next thing that we had to do was develop the hardware interface. So we have to put security in place of the physical equipment. We have to have no moving parts. They've used computer fans to make tattoo machines with in the past. So we had to put a lot of thought into the physical security of the terminals as well as the internet. So we've jumped a bunch of hurdles here, and we're now implemented in multiple states. And we're giving access to these needed resources to incarcerated folks and getting this training done. The next step was to implement some of the testing for manufacturer certifications or professional certifications. We have worked through rigorous requirements from Department of Corrections as well as national testing organizations to become approved and to deliver computer-based testing in corrections. And it's been a real game changer for the inmates because getting this while they're incarcerated the day they get out is big for them to have these credentials secured. So I'm going to turn over to Devin and let him talk to you a little bit about a success story that takes into account the Sophos technology, AWS technology, our proprietary software, which is a key component into making all of this work. We monitor the systems very closely, the usage of the terminal, any anomalies that are detected, we send dynamic emails out immediately to administration and to us to let them know that we see an anomaly that needs to be addressed on the terminal. So with that, I'll turn this over to Devin and let him tell you a little bit about our partnership with General Motors and Automotive Service Excellence.
Thanks, Clay. With this, certainly there's been a whole lot of testing platforms and software platforms that we've been the first to virtualize and make it happen. But I think the ASE and the GM story is a pretty good example. So ASE is Automotive Service Excellence, and if you go to a mechanic shop or a dealership, the folks inside there doing work are ASE certified. And it's not easy to be a mechanic. I mean, you've got to be kind of like a computer tech person these days. But the problem is that there's a shortage in it, and they're not graduating enough people to take over the demand for it. And shortly after getting one of these jobs in a dealership, you could be making $100,000 a year. But this started evaporating away because there were no longer. It was becoming very difficult to get an ASE test. A lot of places it was just you couldn't get your certification. If you were lucky enough to be at one of the prisons that would bring you to a testing center, it started at 2 a.m. You went to the infirmary, got checked out, and then they were, bussed for a couple hours each way, shackled together. There's state troopers involved. There's correctional officers involved, and they brought up all these stairs. And by the time they're testing, by the time they sit down and take a test, they've been up for 8 hours. And so this is just a real game changer where they're able to go in, take a test, and be well rested, have their coffee, and sit down and do all those things when we've taken a test at when they tell you to prepare for a test that you should be well rested and get a good night's sleep and eat a breakfast. Well, now they're able to have those same situations. Clay, I'll turn it over to you for this one.
So the first ever Automotive Service Excellence professional testing took place at Angola Prison in Louisiana last November. Angola is the largest maximum security prison in the nation, and they have an incredible reentry program that we're very proud to be part of. Like Devin said, the testing before they had to be transferred to a public testing center. It was very expensive, risk of flight, lots of things that can cause problems. So now, just like any day they wake up, they go to the automotive shop, they get called in one by one and are able to sit down and take their test. The top left photo that you see on this slide, that's me in there talking to these inmates, getting them prepared to take their test. A lot of these inmates have never sat down at a computer before. They have to understand how to use a mouse, how to use the keyboard, and we prep them prior to test day to walk them through the mouse and computer skills so that they're able to effectively take their test. So this is getting them ready to take their test. You can see they're all attentive and listening and very excited to be in there that morning to take that test.
Yeah, and the next picture on the right, you'll see me shaking hands. That fellow was the very first person to ever take an ASE test, and so as soon as he walked out the door, we've got his instructor there, and the fellow on the right, the bigger guy, he's the editor for the Angolite, which is Angola's largest maximum security prison in the United States, and he's the editor there, and he's a lifer. And you can see the smiles on their face as we watch this young man that just took his test, who's going to be well on his way to getting out soon into a real career. And the person standing behind him in the black is a guy named John Sheehan. He's an amazing man. He runs the program at Angola. One of the smartest, nicest guys I've ever met. But he'll probably never get out. He's serving a life sentence. Down here to the left, on the left bottom, you'll see a fellow Daryl. He's getting his grades back. He's one of the instructors. So that fellow also is never getting out of prison, and he works on the transmissions, and he also likes race cars. So we always have a good time every time we're together. But this is where he's at in his life. He's sorry about what he's done, and every day this guy tries to make things right by helping these other young folk or young people that come through this program get out and not come back to prison. And the lady with her hair, her head turned to us, and with the blonde hair, she works for the Education Department in Angola. And at the end of it, there was a lot of tears happening during this. She looked over at us and said, you know, I've been here 27 years, but today was my favorite day of my entire career. Because it was just an amazing moment. You see everybody looking at the test scores, and the one on the right, you'll see the fellow shaking my hand. But what happened before that was there was a lot of tears being shed, and mine including. And he had just come and wrapped his arms around me and thanked us for what we're doing, because these folks, they're often forgotten, and I know that they've done things wrong. You know, nobody's saying that they deserve a free ride or they deserve to get out, but if they do get out, they need a second chance. And you know, meeting some of these folks, I know that they never had the first chance. You know, I think they were set off from the beginning. And Clay, I guess you want to tell them a little bit about General Motors?
Yeah, so we accomplished the ASE certification to be able to test inside the fence, which was great. Your ASE certification is very valuable, and you know, without these technologies from AWS and Sophos, we would not have been able to do this and complete this program inside the prison. My background, I do a lot of IT work for the major car manufacturers and dealerships, and for many years. And I was walking through a dealership about this time last year, and looked into the service area and saw one of the labs that we had set up for the service technicians there to do their continuing education. And just a light bulb went off. I was like, man, we need to progress this further. We need to get a bigger player involved that will allow these folks to be worth more money when they get out. So I engaged my General Motors folks and locally, and we drug the guy on the left there on that picture is a service manager, drug him over to Angola and let him see the program. And he wound up coming back. The two guys on the right in that picture are inmates, and they went behind closed doors and did a job interview just like any normal day. And he was going to hire one of them, and 45 minutes later he came back and hired both of them. He is there sitting at the terminal, teaching them how to use the GM software, getting them all set up for their technician training. This is the first time ever that General Motors has been able to put this type of system into a correctional facility. It's a win for General Motors. It's a win for the dealership. They need technicians. They have a hard time finding them. It's a huge win for the inmate and the family, and for state and in our society. The training that these guys are getting is very valuable. It's so valuable that they are having to sign a 2-year work agreement with this particular dealership, because they can go anywhere in the state and make real good money. So we're very happy to have this the ability to give these inmates this access. Yeah.
Oh yeah, okay, that's my turn. This is my turn here. Well, if you look on the left-hand side, this is one of Craig's. The person in the middle, he's the service manager at this dealership, and he makes about $15 an hour because he is not GM certified. And so the fellow on the right is now, he started at he got out of jail on Wednesday, went to court on Thursday, and went to work on Friday, and started out at $42,000 a year. Had a brand new set of steel toe boots waiting on him, because you have to have that when you're working in a shop environment. And within 2 weeks, he was raised to $50,000 a year. Since then, we've had about 5 other students go through that, and go through the GM training. And I guess I should mention something. If you see like a car dealership, and if you see a whole lot of cars on it versus one with a very few cars, it's all due to the service, the back-end service department. You have to have certified people to work on the cars in order for you to sell the cars, if that makes sense. And so everybody's bonuses, really, in the end, when you look down to it, goes back to the service department. And so now GM was so pleased with the way it worked with this Bill Hood Automotive that now GM is taking it from their headquarters in Detroit and filtering down these lessons to go out to these folks. So when they get out, there's going to be a bidding war. There's so much high need for this. And this is just one industry. I mean, we could go down industry after industry after industry that we've done this for, but we thought this was a good example of showing how we could leverage AWS and Sophos, because quite frankly, without y'all, we would have never been able to do this. And we've only been in business a year and a half. And 2 years ago, if we had been asked this question, the answer would have been no, we can't do it. But thanks to you guys, we are able to do it, and you know, we're all changing lives together.
Yep, it's great to see these technologies actually changing lives. It's a great collaboration of products from both Sophos and AWS and our software that's allowed this to happen, and we're grateful you guys you got it available. And with that, we'll turn it back over to Brian.
Hey, thank you so much. It's really great to see kind of the full circle of things, what the technology can do, and then how you've used the technology and how that's really making a positive impact in other people's lives. And so at this point, we'll go ahead and spend the last few minutes here answering any questions that folks might have.
Yeah, so we have the question panel over here. We've got some questions that come in. We've answered quite a few. I think there's probably some of those that we could probably go over again. So if you guys have questions for the ATLO folks, or if you have questions for AWS or for Sophos, let it rip in the comments, and we'll get through it here. We've got about 8 minutes staying through this stuff. So I know one of the questions that came through was how do you get it? So I know, Clay, you mentioned the 30-day free trial. Brian, you mind talking through that a little bit?
Yeah, so like all the other AWS services that you're familiar with, we also offer a free trial, and it's 30 days, and so you just go into the AWS marketplace and you can select the offer that you're interested in, whether you want to do the HA standby or with the auto scaling, and then you just either select free trial or you can do pay as you go, or if you purchased a license from a Sophos partner, then you could select the BYOL option and then apply the license there. So it's really easy. You just go into the marketplace, and within a few clicks, you're provisioned.
Okay, cool. And then if customers got multiple VPCs, how do you guys connect that? Because I know I've done some work with you guys. That, you can make the Outbound Gateway work across multiple VPCs, but maybe we can talk a little bit about that use case too a little bit.
Yeah, Jorn or Byron, do you want to take that one?
Sorry about that. Can you repeat the question?
Yeah,
so,
how do you, go ahead.
How do you do it for multiple VPCs? What does it look like for deploying UTMs in multiple VPCs?
Oh, great question. This is where our solution highlights our auto-scaling as well as our outbound gateways. So to support a multiple VPC, we follow AWS best practices, which is to have a dedicated VPC where you house your security tools. And with the Sophos solution deploying outbound gateways in your remote VPCs, you can now have all of your traffic from remote VPCs always egress through your security VPC.
Yeah, cool. And I've seen that too, because it's nice because you can basically put the workers in a single VPC, and then each of the sort of spoke or remote VPCs basically just has tunneling, or either you can use the built-in outbound gateway tunneling, or you can use sort of like a transit VPC almost design that we call it, where you use VPN to come in. But you can basically put all your proxying and sort of control components in one VPC and control it from there, which is sort of nice.
True.
Another question that came in was like, what are some of the key use cases you guys are seeing? It sounds like you guys do a lot more than the security groups in terms of what IDS, IPS, URL filtering, sort of. But is there any sort of key use cases that you're seeing bubbling up? Because I guess not everyone's saving the world from training prison inmates and stuff. But what are some other sort of use cases and things that you guys are seeing people use your software for?
In different areas, we're seeing our solution being deployed as part of a disaster recovery solution, where they host in the AWS environment, the UTM, and use things like RAID devices, what ATLO software was talking about earlier for remote places. So that way they have consistent uptime, and if anything was to fail, they know on the AWS side, the UTM is always going to try to reestablish tunnels and connectivity, so if a failure occurs, it will fill up, and when it's reestablished, automation can help fill it back down. So we're seeing DRS service, including the Sophos UTM there, or using it for secure archiving, where they're looking at on-premise security, on-premise storage. They're looking at downsizing their storage array, and they're using our devices to slowly migrate stale data up into AWS.
Cool, okay. And then what about regions? Which regions are you guys in? Do you guys support GovCloud, et cetera?
Yes. So simple word, yes, when you ask which regions we're in, GovCloud plus all around the world.
Okay, cool. And there was another question about sizing. So, you guys' appliance comes in a number of different EC2 instance flavors like C4 large, C4 XL, whatever. What sort of advice do you have for people choosing which size they should use?
Recommendations usually come after asking questions such as, do you have encryption requirements? Do you need full end-to-end encryption? So for example, if you're hosting just one web application, you need end-to-end encryption. All traffic is coming in encrypted. It hits the UTM. The UTM have the ability to decrypt and inspect the traffic, then encrypt it again and send it to the back end. That type of processing will require a certain type of EC2 instance size. So long story short, just asking enough questions about the application, what are the expected traffic coming in, and we can help make some rough guesstimates. We have a document about expected performance. However, if you have a Sophos partner, that's one of your best choices where they can help you vet out the solution and later maybe even deploy it.
Okay, cool. So those seem to be the questions we've got here. I want to thank Clay and Devin for the ATLO story. Like you said, that's a sort of a unique story. We don't get a lot of the social entrepreneurship, as you put it, sort of use cases. We're usually stuck dealing with very exciting technical details, so it was nice to hear something from the real world.
Thank you.
Sophos or anyone else, you guys have any sort of closing thoughts on this, or anything you want to leave people with? I know you guys have the email, alias, that people can contact you for more questions, right?
Yeah, I guess I would just say, if there are any additional questions or if folks attending are working with UTM on AWS and need a little bit of help, you can always reach out to our email alias, which is ias@sophos.com, so ias@sophos.com.
Very cool. And again, the recording and the slides will be sent out, in a few days, so you guys will get copies of all this. And I want to thank everyone for joining. Thanks for the time.